Welcome to this edition of Bury Your Bookie. I was going to say this Thursday edition of Bury Your Bookie. We got Mike Jones here, and I always get excited when Mike's on the show because he's so enthusiastic about so many different things about the degenerate gambling that we try to take part in. And you've got something there. You were listening, I guess, the big beautiful bill. We don't often cross into politics here, but
Hmm.
and this was something that I remember when they made the changes to the rulings about taxing racetrack winnings, where you always could write off an equal amount of losses. I guess this applied to casino winnings as well on your tax returns, and even get back money that had been withheld if you happen to hit for a big jackpot. They changed the ruling many years ago about having to sign for certain tickets,
Hmm.
where it used to be based on 300 to 1. And so if a trifecta, for example, paid $600, you were hoping instead it would have paid 599.50 or whatever,
Hmm.
because you wouldn't have had to sign for the ticket. And they eventually changed that so it was based on the amount of money that was wagered on that single ticket. So if you hit a $600 try, you didn't have to sign anymore if you would bet $20 to accomplish hitting that payoff. So and that was good. That was very favorable for the player because it was annoying to always have to sign for these things and then have to account for it at the end of the
Hmm.
year. And in case you got audited, which I think was more common years ago as well, you had to come in with a shoebox full of losing tickets, supposedly attached to that day's program. It was a real process and a pain in the ass, and it seemed unnecessary because in the long run you were losing your ass anyway. But now that this bill that's apparently going to pass also includes some kind of clarification on gambling winnings, what's your understanding about that?
Yeah, that nine you only be able to claim 90% of losses, meaning if you win 40 grand in the course of a year, you're going to have to lose 44,000 to not claim that 40 grand you won. So, yeah, it was a kind of a wash where if you your end result now it's going to be that you're going to have to lose more than you win to not have to pay. So, yeah, it's just you wonder what they're really thinking. Let's make it's hard enough to win anyway. Most
Yeah,
players lose, and now you're going to get if you're a heavy player, it probably hurts the guy that's trying to make a living off of it, or really the heavy player, the guy who's betting 5,000 a game and thinks he's betting with the right house. Next thing you know, he wins 10,000 for the year, but he's got 500,000 in winnings. It was $20,000 plays, and now he's going to have to pay
yeah,
on that money. So I think what you're going to see is they want to kind of dial down the heavy volume, and I think this is a way to do it where it's going to take a guy who all of a sudden thinks he's doing all right, and then the IRS gives him an audit, and he owes 40,000 on a break-even year because his winnings were more than you thought. So it really probably hinders. I would think the bigger gambler, the guy betting more than 1,000 a game compared to the little guy, but again, it's going to be they're documented. When I was in Vegas, I used to collect all the losing tickets, so I would be prepared for when,
yeah.
if I won, I always had, I kept my losing tickets, which is, people throw them away in anger. I used to keep mine. I just knew. And plus, it's also, when you get a stack this big of losing tickets, it's also an eye opener to say maybe you should slow down a little
Yeah.
bit.
Although that could be a misnomer because,
Yeah,
horse racing guy, you don't obviously save your winning tickets, but you may
right.
have a stack of losers. You might have won a couple of dimes on the day. And I have this habit, just one of my weird superstitions, where I just stack up my losing tickets. Say you're in a little booth there in Las Vegas at one of the race books, and I'll have a whole pile of losing tickets. And whatever woman I happen to be with at the time, if we were in any kind of meaningful relationship that involved financial interaction, they'd come down and they'd see this stack of losing tickets sitting there. And you might have been up, like I said, a couple of dimes at the time, but she would say, "Look at this, 100, 200. I mean, how much? You're killing us." And you'd say, "No, look at my wallet here. I got all this money." But yeah, you don't save the winners
No,
because you're obviously turning them in to be cashed. So
yeah.
it can be a bit of an illusion. But I always, and fortunately, I don't think I was ever audited on that particular aspect. I've been audited a couple of times where you had to drag your ass in there with an accountant and a bunch of excuses and maybe some trumped up documents. But imagine the auditor going through that, where you have the shoebox full of losing racing tickets or
Yeah.
casino bets, and are they really going to scrutinize that? Sit
Yeah.
there, and do some kind of financial forensics to see if you were cheating on that aspect? It seems to me, if you've won gambling, you deserve to keep all of it. I mean, you really do. For any winning year that you've had,
Yeah.
and like you said, most people are losing and in
Yeah.
the long
I
run doing
mean,
this for entertainment much more
we,
so than making
we
money.
used, we used to joke that they're not building those monstrosities in Vegas and redoing these hotels on winners. You
No,
know, I mean, they're getting the rents and they're getting the taxes and all. I mean, they're charging people an arm and leg to have a shop in these hotels and all that now. But shopping is big. You know, the partying is big out there. But you know, it went from 70% of revenue down to around 20, I think it is now, the gambling. But they were getting it. They were getting the players and they were losing. But about the change of, I think around 2005, six, I think we started seeing the revenues flip up a little bit. And now there's and now you can go to almost every state and find a place to play blackjack or bet a sports game now. So it makes Vegas a little obsolete.
somewhat, although it's still a great destination. In fact, I
Sure.
was just talking with you
Fantastic.
about another show
Yep.
about. I had my 70th birthday party out in Las Vegas, and we probably had about 16, 20 people come out there and party for a few days. And I just, I mean, I have to do. I'm going to be 74 this year, but 75 has to be in Las Vegas, and I think
I'll be there.
in
I'll,
5 year increments. Yeah, we'll have to go out there and have a good time.
I'll be there.
All right, a
Yeah.
lot of stuff to wager
Yeah.
on. You're big on Major League Baseball. I did see your theory got shot down, though, and I went against you the other day in picking the Marlins to win that first game against the Twins because you're
Mm-hmm.
getting plus 122 versus laying
Right.
145 with the Twins. I thought, geez, they
Mm-hmm.
won 7 in a row. I know Mike loves it when a team comes back
Yeah.
off a road trip to bet against them in that first game at home.
Mm-hmm.
You had 2 plays on there with the Pirates and the Marlins getting beat. They
Mm-hmm.
won. Both of those teams prevailed. I
Yep.
was also thinking in games pitched by and started by Paul Skeens, if you had the under this year, you probably cashed almost every night, right?
Yeah. You're
That he was
doing well.
around. That
Yep.
never mind taking him to get the win because he
Mm-hmm.
hasn't been able to get any support. But he's shutting everybody down with like a sub 2 earned run average over his last 10 starts. I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
the under players are dancing to the windows
Yep.
anytime Skeens pitches a game.
Well, you have the Pirates now on a 6 game streak where they've outscored their opponents 43-4. Shut out the Cardinals in 3 straight now.
Yeah,
That was one of the commentators we
33
were
straight
talking
shutout
about.
innings. Yeah, something
Yeah,
like
Arenado might be on a trade block. Rumor is the Yankees are interested in Arenado now. So, you know, you're seeing that maybe even with a winning record, St. Louis might be thinking this might be they might have gotten about most of what they got in the first half of the season. And now who knows where they're going to be. But yeah, yeah, that was a pretty much of a shocker. And you know, Keller's been really good. Never got run support. I think he's picked up a second win or third win or whatever, and I think he's 3-10 or 3-11. Yeah, yeah. Just the Pirates can pitch, and now the bats are coming around a little bit, and you see what happens when they hit that. I know you were on them last year, right, for an over bet at the
Pirates. Yeah, we hit them on the overbet last year.
right.
We did very well with our futures a year ago when we first started doing this thing, and had pretty good success picking baseball games in general.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the handicapping strategies have certainly changed because it used to
Yeah.
be largely based on starting pitchers, and
Mm-hmm.
now you have these guys going even when they're going great, they're only going into the fifth,
Yeah.
sixth inning, if even that. I mean, I'm looking at a couple of things. The Wimbledon upsets have been fantastic.
Crazy.
So if you're on the right side of those,
Mm-hmm.
you're enormously in front, especially on the women's side, where you've had 4 of the top 5 seeds already knocked out of the tournament before we got through the second round, and a
Right.
couple of those in the first round fell,
Mm-hmm.
including Pagula and Coco Gauff. Zhang,
Mm-hmm.
I think, also went out in the first round, a
Sure.
Chinese woman. And now Paolini, very popular Italian, that
Mm-hmm.
little pixie of a player who just goes out there and is a real firebird when she's out there on the court. And she's already gone. So you do
Yeah.
have Sabalenka left, Rybakina, who's won Wimbledon before, and also Swiatek, as I think they pronounce it now, is still alive. I don't know. Do you see anybody?
Yeah,
Anybody?
Rabakina plays soccer today, and I took the Rabakina to win in straight sets. I think that's one of the bets that you can now make is over under 1.5 sets, or
Yeah,
the player wins
total
by
games too
one
is
and a
a
half.
good one.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can bet on tennis, and I think it's a more popular sport bet. But that was one that we had. We did have Paolini going 3 sets yesterday at plus 200. That was a winner. You
Nice.
know, so yeah, so we were messing around with the tennis a little bit. We had Taylor Fritz going, you know, plus plus 1.5. I had the other guy Diallo plus 1.5 set so that it would go 5, and we hit that a little bit of the plus money yesterday. Just thinking, some of these guys that play in these 2 or 3 days now, Fritz, they got him in because he would have played in 4 straight days. I think he played the first day and then had to carry over the second day because the match didn't finish.
Right.
And then it was put on the court again yesterday, and they had to shut the roof, and he finished late at night too. So instead of these guys playing all these days, I think it's wear and tear on the body. So you might want to look for another distance match with Fritz in the third round. Things like that with tennis is just a grind. But ESPN did, and I don't mean to get us off track here, but this is, I think, important for a better to know. The ESPN did a little story about the mental health in tennis. And one of the things that came up with, Mary Jo Fernandez addressed it, was that these players are actually stressed over betting, that
Oh yeah.
they're worried about their people betting on them, that it's stressful for the players to listen to social media. Hey, you stunk, you cost me this. And they follow all these comments. And now it's one thing when you're a team doing this,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's a whole other thing when it's individuals. I've always thought that golf matchups eventually could get decided on a fan yelling in the middle of a putt. I thought that when PASPA was passed, that golf would be the initial part. But now I'm starting to think that tennis could be the sport that, a lot of young players that move up and the teenagers that are playing. And with social media being such an important part, Mary Jo Fernandez says, I recommend that none of these players go on social media after a tough loss, because there's also the gambling aspect of the stress that puts on them to do it. So when you see like Iga Swiatek travels with a psychiatrist
Yes.
on her team, has one, and I watched her implode in certain matches. We're like, what's going on with her? Like, why all of a sudden is she trying to rip the ball when all she could do is place, and she clearly can out hit the opponent? And if you're betting on this at laying 350 with her because she's a top 5 seed, you get frustrated. So I want to get out and say something to her like, what are you doing? Get out a tweet after I lose money on her. So I think there is this part of now gambling in tennis and in these sports where maybe the players are feeling a little more pressure just from knowing that they're being bet on. Just a comment that was made, so I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it always interested me about highlight, where you had humans involved, and that was one of the first applications of it. Because before that, I mean, you're betting on horses; they don't know what the odds are. You're betting on dogs; they don't know what the odds are. But when you're betting on humans, they're well aware of what the hell. I mean, it's right there on the board above them as next to the point total, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought that added a lot of pressure to what they were doing. Unfortunately, I think it also added a lot of incentive to go ahead and make some arrangements, much like they used to do in harness racing when my man Carmine Abatello, who somehow made it into the Harness Racing Hall of Fame, even though he was implicated and I believe convicted in a horse racing horse fixing,
Yes.
operation. And yeah, so I mean, hard to think that he had Hall of Fame stature after that, but he did win a lot of races. He also had, I think, the biggest triceps from holding these horses back. Huge triceps. I met him one day. It
Oh,
was like,
God.
man, what do you do? Are you in the gym every day? He's like, no, I've been holding back those 3 to 5 shots. So, yeah, the human element is certainly something to take into consideration, especially like you said, in an individual sport, because it's kind of crazy to think that these guys are having to worry about the disparaging remarks that are coming their way after they end up losing a match, and then they have to deal with all of that. You might have frozen up on me, Mike Jones. I don't know. Are you still with us here? You might have to tap back in and check out. We've got a smiling Mike Jones in a frozen position here on Bury Your Bookie. Wanted to get into some golf with him as well, because I was looking over the odds here for this John Deere Classic. And Mike, I don't know if you can hear me anymore, but if you can, you got to punch out and probably punch back in, because you've become a fixture, almost a statue here on the program. So we're sorry about that, people, because we want to get Mike's baseball picks. I'm looking at a couple of guys here, and I was discouraged from. I was thinking about this Si Woo Kim in the John Deere Classic, 30-1. His results are not at all favorable. So I was discouraged from even mentioning his name here on the program. I was trying to find a winner. Ben Griffin is the favorite at 16-1, a pretty generous offering on a favorite in a golf tournament. But I'm looking at this guy, Jake Knapp, is 35-1. Is it possible that he could demonstrate a little bit more consistency? He's a guy that shot 2 of the lowest rounds this year on the Pro Golf Tour. He had a 59 earlier in the season. I believe that was in the tournament in Palm Beach, the name of which is like the Cognizant Classic, I think. Now it used to be the Honda Classic for many, many years. And also shot a 61 just recently. He hasn't been able to put the 4 rounds together to win a tournament, but at 35 to 1 against a field that doesn't include many of the top names, I'm going to take a shot there with Jake Knapp in the John Deere Classic. I probably missed a cut now that I said that. And so that was one that I was looking at. And yeah, a couple of other players that are involved there. This is taking place in Illinois. As I said, with Siwoo Kim, no top fives in this season. His best finish in his last 5 tournaments was 28th. And at 30 to 1, while his name pops up and you're thinking, well, without the heavyweights in there, he would certainly be in there with a shot. Recent performances would be very, very discouraging. And you're thinking, I'm going to make a little passeroo on that. The Marlins last night had their 8-game winning streak snapped. And if you lost that bet, you had reason to think that the gods of gambling were just absolutely pissing on your grave. Because a weird rule, it's like Rule 506 BC, something along those lines, where the umpire is hit by the baseball as it's about to go through the infield. And so the hitter was awarded first base. The Marlins were down 2-1 at the time. The batter was a guy named Stowers who gets the credit for the base hit. He gets first base. But they had a runner on second base who almost certainly would have scored as the ball was going through the infield. And yet, when the umpire is struck, the ruling is it becomes a dead ball. And so the runner had to return to second base. The guy that was on second base had to go back to that base. And instead of scoring and making the game 2-2 and giving the Marlins a chance to sustain their winning streak and run it to 9, which would have been an all-time franchise record, or tied it going back to 1997, they end up losing the ball game 2-1 on the Minnesota Twins. So you need a lot of luck in this lifetime, and you certainly ran into some bad luck if you ended up on the losing end of that one, which I was inclined to go ahead and say, hey, just keep riding the streak until it ends. That was an old theory in Major League Baseball that when a team either wins or loses 3 games in a row, that you bet them to continue whichever side of the streak it was until it's finally snapped. And the theory was that if you would do that with every team that was in that circumstance from the beginning of the season, you would essentially have an annuity, because it almost always came out positively for the bettor that was following that strategy. Not sure. I haven't really tracked it over the last couple of years that that's applicable anymore. But you would have been inclined last night to go ahead and run that streak up to 9, and instead you end up getting jobbed because barely nicked the umpire. He tried his best to get out of the way, but couldn't dodge the baseball, and you ended up on the losing side. A couple of other things that were applicable yesterday also, the theories that I like. You had 2 doubleheaders being played, and even though the teams that lost the first game of both doubleheaders were in the throes of an abysmal slump, both came back and won the second game. So I'm always looking at the idea that almost all doubleheaders, the majority of doubleheaders are splits. So if you're lining up for game 2 of a doubleheader, no matter how ugly the result was in the first game, go ahead and bet the team that lost the first game to win a second. And I'm sure if we had an unfrozen Mike Jones, he would agree with me that that would be a play that you could make with a large level of confidence and probably score the majority of times. But it worked in both circumstances yesterday, including with the Mets, who have been just laying an egg consistently of late, and finally snapped out of it by winning the second game of their doubleheader. All right, we will not be with you on the 4th or on Monday. And we apologize for the technical difficulties today, because we wanted to hear Mike's thoughts on a variety of different things here on the show. We'll try and get things back on track for you on Tuesday, the next edition of Bury Your Bookie. So for a frozen Mike Jones, the frozen tundra, I'm Jeff DeForest. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great 4th of July weekend and celebration, everybody. It all gets underway tomorrow. We have to pay homage to a degenerate gambling aficionado that I got to know some 45 years ago when I first moved to Florida. You guys probably knew him from his appearances, many appearances on ESPN. He was involved in horse racing and, of course, took over for the great Pete Axthelm as the football handicapper for ESPN. My friend Hank Goldberg, he checked out, I believe, 3 years ago. Was born on July 4th and passed away, oddly and ironically, on July 4th as well. A couple of years back, while living out in Las Vegas, still doing stuff on various gambling sites, including CBS Sports. Was always looked upon as an expert when it came to this stuff, was way ahead of his time and doing this stuff in the media. So may he rest in peace, and a happy 4th of July birthday to our good buddy and a flag bearer for the Degenerate Brethren, the late great Hank Goldberg. We wish him, all of the best in terms of our memories and any interaction that you had with him. Always somehow the subject came around to odds at some kind of wagering conversation. So you guys have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you again on Tuesday in the next edition of Bury Your Bookie. For Mike, I'm Jeff DeForest. See you next time on the next edition of Bury Your